At 11:47 p.m. on a Friday night in suburban Atlanta, Officer Denise Williams pulled over a black Mercedes doing 68 in a 45 zone. Standard traffic stop, speeding, residential area, late night. But the moment the driver rolled down his window and said, "Do you know who I am? I'm Councilman Gregory Barrett. I know your chief. This stop is over." Officer Williams knew this wasn't going to be standard at all. What Councilman Barrett didn't know was that his entire interaction was being recorded on body camera and dashcam. What he didn't anticipate was that his attempt to use political power to escape a traffic ticket would end up in court, go viral with 40 million views, and teach him the hardest lesson of his political career. Status doesn't protect you from consequences when you abuse it. This is the story of a traffic stop that became a reckoning, and a judge who reminded everyone watching that equality under the law isn't negotiable. Officer Denise Williams had been with the Atlanta Metro Police Department for 6 years. She was professional, thorough, and known for treating everyone equally. Whether you drove a beat-up Honda or a luxury vehicle, whether you were polite or belligerent, you got the same fair treatment. When she clocked the Mercedes at 68 miles per hour in a residential neighborhood where kids often played in their yards even at night, she initiated the stop without hesitation. Speeding 23 miles over the limit in a residential zone is dangerous regardless of who's driving. The Mercedes pulled over immediately, no evasion, no problems. Williams approached the driver's side, her flashlight illuminating the interior of the vehicle. The driver was a well-dressed man in his mid-50s, clearly annoyed at being stopped. Before Williams could even introduce herself and request license and registration, he launched into his defense. "Officer, I'm City Councilman Gregory Barrett. I represent District 7. I was just leaving a council meeting that ran late, and I'm heading home. I wasn't speeding. Your radar must be wrong. And frankly, I don't appreciate being pulled over when I'm on city business." Williams, maintaining her professional demeanor, responded calmly. "Sir, I clocked you at 68 in a 45 zone. That's 23 miles over the speed limit in a residential area. I need to see your license, registration, and proof of insurance." Barrett's expression shifted from annoyed to indignant. He pulled out his wallet but didn't immediately produce his license. Instead, he pulled out a business card, his official city council card, and held it up to her. "I don't think you understand who you're dealing with. I'm on the budget committee that approves your department's funding. I know Chief Anderson personally. I suggest you reconsider whether you want to proceed with this stop." This is where the interaction became something more than a traffic stop. It became a test of whether political power could override law enforcement doing its job. Williams, to her credit, didn't flinch. "Sir, with all due respect, your position doesn't exempt you from traffic laws. I still need to see your license, registration, and insurance." Barrett's face flushed red. "You're making a mistake, officer. I'm giving you one more chance to walk away from this. I can make one phone call, and you'll regret this stop. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" Williams understood perfectly. She was being threatened, not physically, but professionally. Barrett was using his political position to intimidate her into letting him go without consequences. It was a moment that every police officer dreads, when someone with power tries to use that power to escape accountability. Williams made a decision that would define this entire incident. She would not be intimidated. "Sir, you're now being recorded on body camera and dashcam. I'm going to ask you one final time for your license, registration, and insurance. If you refuse to provide them, you'll be cited for failure to provide documentation in addition to the speeding violation." Barrett finally handed over his documents, but the hostility radiating from him was palpable. "You have no idea what you've just done to your career," he muttered. Williams ran his information, license valid, registration current, no warrants. She returned to the Mercedes and handed Barrett a citation for speeding 23 miles per hour over the limit in a residential zone. "Sir, you can contest this citation in court if you believe it was issued in error. The court date is listed on the ticket." Barrett snatched the citation from her hand. "Oh, I'll be contesting this, and you'll be hearing from my attorney. This is harassment, and I won't stand for it." What Barrett didn't realize in his anger was that Williams had done everything by the book. She'd been professional despite his threats. She'd documented everything on camera, and most importantly, she'd treated him exactly the way she'd treat anyone else, with fairness and adherence to the law. Barrett drove away that night convinced that his political connections would make this ticket disappear and possibly cost Williams her job. He had no idea that his attempt to abuse power would backfire in the most public way possible. Councilman Barrett didn't pay the ticket. He contested it, as was his right, and the case was scheduled for traffic court 6 weeks later. But Barrett made a critical error. He assumed this would be handled quietly, maybe with a phone call from his attorney to the prosecutor, a dismissal based on insufficient evidence, or a technicality. He underestimated two things. First, that Officer Williams had documented the stop so thoroughly that dismissal wasn't an option. Second, that the judge assigned to his case was someone who took judicial integrity very seriously. Judge Maria Santos had been on the bench for 12 years. She'd earned a reputation as tough but fair. She followed the law strictly, showed no favoritism based on wealth or status, and had zero tolerance for anyone who tried to use influence in her courtroom. When she reviewed the case file and saw that the defendant was a city councilman who'd allegedly threatened an officer during a traffic stop, she requested the body camera and dashcam footage. What she watched made her furious. A clear abuse of political position, an attempt to intimidate a police officer, and a blatant claim that status should override law. The courtroom on the day of Barrett's hearing was more crowded than usual. Word had spread through the police department about Barrett's behavior during the stop, and several officers attended to support Williams. A few local reporters were present. Traffic court isn't usually newsworthy, but a city councilman contesting a ticket after allegedly threatening an officer had piqued their interest. Barrett arrived with his attorney, a high-priced lawyer named Richard Thornton who specialized in making problems disappear for wealthy clients. They sat at the defense table exuding confidence. When the case was called, Officer Williams took the stand first. She testified about the traffic stop, the speed she'd clocked, the location, Barrett's refusal to initially provide documentation, and most significantly, his threats. He told me he could make one phone call, and I'd regret the stop. He referenced his position on the budget committee that funds the police department. He implied that my career would suffer if I proceeded with the citation. Thornton, Barrett's attorney, tried to undermine her testimony during cross-examination. Officer Williams, isn't it possible you misunderstood my client's concern? Perhaps he was simply explaining that he's a public figure, and this could be handled differently? Williams didn't budge. Sir, there was no misunderstanding. Your client explicitly threatened my career and referenced his political power as a reason I should let him go without a citation for speeding 23 miles over the limit in a residential area. Judge Santos intervened at this point. Mr. Thornton, I've reviewed the body camera and dashcam footage. The court will be viewing that footage shortly, and I suspect it will clarify any question about whether Officer Williams misunderstood your client's statements. Continue. The footage was played in the courtroom. The audio was crystal clear. Every word Barrett had said, every threat, every attempt to use his position to avoid consequences. The visual showed Williams remaining professional throughout, while Barrett became increasingly aggressive and entitled. When Barrett's voice came through the speakers saying, "I can make one phone call, and you'll regret this stop," you could see several people in the courtroom shaking their heads. This wasn't ambiguous. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a powerful man trying to intimidate a police officer into letting him break the law without consequences. You said, Judge Santos stopped the video and turned to Barrett. Councilman Barrett, I'm going to give you an opportunity to testify if you choose. But first, I want to make something clear. This court does not care about your political position. I don't care if you're a city councilman, a state senator, or the governor himself. In this courtroom, everyone is equal under the law. Do you understand that? Barrett, looking less confident now, nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Santos continued. Then let me ask you directly. Did you tell Officer Williams that you could make one phone call and she'd regret stopping you? Barrett hesitated. His attorney whispered something to him. Finally, Barrett answered. I may have said something like that, but I didn't mean it as a threat. I was frustrated, and Santos cut him off. You may have said something like that? We just watched video of you saying exactly that. So let me be more specific. Did those words come out of your mouth? Barrett, cornered, admitted, yes. Judge Santos leaned back in her chair, her expression revealing controlled anger. Councilman Barrett, you sped through a residential neighborhood at 23 miles over the limit. When a police officer rightfully stopped you, Instead of taking responsibility, you tried to use your political position to intimidate her into letting you go without consequences. You threatened her career. You implied that your status put you above the law. That behavior is not just inappropriate. It's a fundamental betrayal of the public trust that your constituents placed in you when they elected you to represent them. The courtroom was silent. Barrett's lawyer looked like he wanted to object, but couldn't find grounds. Barrett himself had gone pale. Judge Santos continued, "I'm finding you guilty of speeding 23 miles per hour over the limit in a residential zone. The fine for that violation is $350 plus court costs. But there's something more troubling here than speeding. You attempted to corrupt the enforcement of law by using your political position to intimidate an officer. While I don't have jurisdiction over ethics violations in your political capacity, I am forwarding a copy of this proceeding, including the video evidence, to the City Ethics Board for their review." Barrett stood up. "Your Honor, with all due respect," Santos silenced him with a look. "Sit down, Councilman. I'm not finished." Barrett sat. Santos continued, "Officer Williams did her job with professionalism and integrity despite your threats. She deserves commendation, not intimidation. You, on the other hand, need to understand something fundamental. Your position is not a shield from consequences. It's a responsibility. You're supposed to model respect for the law, not contempt for it. You're supposed to serve the public, not use your power to serve yourself. I hope this experience teaches you that lesson, because if you appear in my courtroom again with this kind of behavior, the consequences will be far more severe." The judgment was entered. Barrett paid his fine, but the story didn't end there. One of the reporters in the courtroom had recorded the judge's remarks and published them in an article titled "City Councilman Cited for Speeding After Attempting to Intimidate Officer." The article included quotes from the hearing and mentioned that the video had been forwarded to the Ethics Board. Within 24 hours, that article had been shared thousands of times on social media. Within a week, someone had obtained the body camera footage through an open records request and posted it online. It went viral, 40 million views in 2 weeks. The public response was overwhelmingly against Barrett. Comments flooded in. Finally, a judge who doesn't let politicians get away with acting above the law. That officer deserves a medal for not backing down. This is what accountability looks like. The City Ethics Board opened an investigation. Barrett's constituents started a recall petition. His fellow council members publicly distanced themselves from him. And Officer Denise Williams became something of a folk hero, the cop who stood her ground against political intimidation and won. Barrett eventually issued a public apology. "I made a serious error in judgment. I let frustration override my better instincts, and I tried to use my position inappropriately. I apologize to Officer Williams, to Judge Santos, and to the residents of District 7. I'm committed to rebuilding the trust I've damaged." Whether the apology was sincere or strategic damage control was debated, but the damage to his reputation was done. He lost his re-election bid the following year, with voters citing the traffic stop incident as evidence he believed he was above the rules that applied to everyone else. Today, Officer Denise Williams still patrols in Atlanta. She received a commendation from her department for her professionalism during the Barrett stop. Judge Maria Santos continues to preside over cases with the same integrity she showed that day. And Gregory Barrett works in the private sector. His political career ended by his own arrogance during a traffic stop that should have been routine. This story matters because it reminds us that accountability isn't optional, even for the powerful, especially for the powerful. Barrett thought his status as a city councilman made him immune from consequences for speeding and for threatening an officer. He was wrong. Judge Santos made sure he was wrong in the most public way possible. And that's exactly what we need from our justice system. The lesson here isn't about traffic tickets. It's about power and how it corrupts when there's no accountability. Barrett had real power, budget control over the police department, relationships with law enforcement leadership, political connections. He could have used that power responsibly. Instead, he tried to wield it as a weapon against a police officer doing her job. And he learned that in a courtroom with an honest judge, power doesn't matter. The law matters. Evidence matters. Truth matters. That if this story reminded you that justice can still work when the right people are in the right positions, share it. Share it with someone who's lost faith in the system. Share it with someone who thinks wealth and power always win. Share it with someone who needs to remember that sometimes the good guys actually win. Drop a comment telling me about a time you stood up to someone abusing their power or a time you witnessed accountability actually working. These stories matter because they give us hope that the system isn't completely broken. Hit that like button if you believe in equal justice regardless of status. Subscribe because we tell stories about ordinary people who refuse to be intimidated by powerful people, about judges who remember that their job is justice, not favoritism, and about moments when the system works exactly the way it's supposed to. Gregory Barrett thought his status put him above scrutiny. Judge Santos and Officer Williams proved him wrong. And 40 million people watched it happen, remembered it, and shared it as proof that sometimes, not always, but sometimes, power doesn't protect you from consequences when you abuse it. Stand your ground when you're right. Do your job with integrity even when it's hard. And remember that the most powerful words in a courtroom are still equal under the law.